Profile by Stanley W. Cloud. Hail to the ex-chief. Despite all his troubles in the White House, Jimmy Carter, yes, Jimmy Carter, may be the best former president America has ever had.
In Ojubi, Ghana, on a sweltering African afternoon, James Earl Carter Jr. sits at one end of a large grassy field and acknowledges the applause of farmers gathered around the perimeter. Many of the farmers have samples of their harvest in baskets before them: corn, sorghum, squash, fruit. Large clouds play tag in the blue sky overhead, while at the opposite end of the field, the stern chiefs of several local villages sit dressed in traditional robes, each carrying a staff topped by a gilt talisman of his authority. On a platform in front of Carter, a local agricultural official in tan trousers and a T-shirt bends to speak into a microphone. "President Carter," he says, "we are very grateful to you. Because of what you have done for the past 2 years, maize has been wonderfully produced in this area. This is wonderful. In fact, we love you. We love you almost as much as we love peanuts."
Jimmy Carter grins. Jimmy Carter is a happy man, despite everything, despite his disappointing presidency and the Iran hostage crisis, which helped deliver him into Ronald Reagan's eager hands. Despite the scorn of various pundits and self-appointed guardians of Washington society, despite his own manifest and manifold weaknesses as a politician, despite lust in my heart, malaise, and killer rabbits, Carter has discovered life after the White House. More than that, he has redefined the meaning and purpose of the modern ex-presidency. While Reagan peddles his time and talents to the highest bidder, and Gerald Ford perfects his putt, and Richard Nixon struggles to gain a toehold in history, Carter, like some jazzed superhero, circles the globe at 30,000 feet, seeking opportunities to do good. While that's true, Carter has discovered life after the White House. He's now selling Amway.
What's Amway, Marcy?
It's a line of home products like cleaners and stuff that is sold by individual salesmen rather than in any stores. Some of the salesmen sell door to door.
An ex-president can't do any better than that.
George, it's a joke.
Oh.
And finding plenty of them. One moment he's in China, trying to mediate between the leaders in Beijing and their unhappy Tibetan subjects. The next he's in Panama, prowling the streets before dawn on election day, paying a surprise call on the vote counters, bellowing at them in his modest Spanish, "Are you honest people, or are you thieves?" and emerging to denounce Manuel Noriega for taking the elections by fraud. Then, almost before you know it, Carter is swooping down on sub-Saharan Africa, trying to help eradicate disease or persuade farmers to enlist in the Green Revolution. And this week, in Atlanta, the former president is to convene negotiations, after a year of personal diplomacy, between the Marxist-Leninist government of Ethiopia and the Eritrean rebels to end a quarter-century of civil war. And next week we'll find him on the roller coaster at Disneyland.
What does the roller coaster at Disneyland have to do with the ending Civil War?
Absolutely nothing.
So why did they say it?
To make a joke. It's supposed to be funny.
Why aren't you laughing?
It was mildly amusing but not funny. Your face, though. Now there's something funny. With all this activity, Carter has emerged as the best ex-president the U.S. has had since Herbert Hoover, another one-termer whose failures in office did not prevent him from decades of productive public service afterward. In a way, Carter has used the White House as a stepping stone to better things and better days. Says Carter, as president, I wouldn't have had time to do all the things I'm doing now. But he was too busy bailing out Billy anyway.
Billy who?
His brother, Billy Carter. He was a big, fat slob who always needed help.
Kind of like you.
Watch it. I know karate and several other Japanese words.
Busy as he is, Carter, who will turn 65 next month, and his marginally less hyperactive wife, Rosalind, who turned 62 last month, do manage to find time for more traditional pastimes. Tennis on their backyard court in Plains, Georgia, for example, and early morning jogs wherever they may happen to be. The Carters also still read a fair amount. He was so impressed with John le Carre's new novel, The Russia House, that he's rereading Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and wishing he could meet the author. She has just completed Gabriel Garcia Marquez's Love in the Time of Cholera, and there is bird watching in Africa, fly fishing from Colorado to the Andes, and furniture making in Carter's home workshop in Plains, where he has turned out, among other handsome pieces, the canopied four-poster bed he and Rosalind, whom he often calls Rosie, share. Yes, in addition to his four-poster bed, he also makes one heck of a corncob pipe.
Ever smoked a corncob pipe, George?
What's a corncob pipe?
What do you think? It's a pipe for smoking tobacco made out of the cob from an ear of corn. They are very popular in the south part of the U.S.
What's a heck of a corncob pipe?
It means it's a good one, like I'm a heck of a person.
Hey, heck of a person. I want to get hold of a corncob pipe.
But leisure time has never been that important to Carter. If he and Rosalind, having written no fewer than 6 books between them since 1981, are giving their word processors a rest for a while, both still teach Sunday school whenever they're home, and both periodically don their carpenter's aprons, pack up their hammers, saws, and chisels, and travel to the South Bronx or Philadelphia, or next year, Tijuana, Mexico, to help build low-cost housing. More than anything else, the picture of Jimmy Carter wearing a baseball cap, faded jeans, and running shoes, and helping build a new house, like a good neighbor, at a Georgia barn raising, captures the essence of his ex-presidency. Let's put that man on a box of cornflakes.
Hear, hear. Not that he and Rosalind haven't had their share of defeats and sadness. The closely spaced deaths in 1983 of his younger sister Ruth of cancer and his famous mother Miss Lillian, followed by the loss of his antic younger brother Billy last year. Even so, in the couple's 1987 book, Everything to Gain, Rosalind wrote, "If we have not achieved our early dreams, we must either find new ones or see what we can salvage from the old. If we have accomplished what we set out to do in our youth, then we need not weep like Alexander the Great that we have no more worlds to conquer. There is clearly much left to be done, and whatever else we are going to do, we had better get on with it." Yes, no more worlds to conquer. Scotty, beam me up. This planet sucks.
It is a lesson the Carters learned the hard way. After the dramatic improbability of Carter's victorious 1976 presidential campaign, losing the 1980 election to Ronald Reagan was a terrible blow. The incoming first couple didn't make things any easier. During the transition, the Reagans suggested that the Carters should vacate the White House early to give Nancy more time for redecoration. A notion the Carters rejected out of hand. "We were elected to serve a full term," says a still angry Rosalind, "and we were going to serve a full term." Carter was wounded again when he and fellow former presidents Nixon and Ford, recruited to represent President Reagan at Anwar Sadat's funeral, were assigned to the relatively cramped tail section of Air Force One. So the 3 ex-presidents, none of them then comfortable in the other's presence, sat in nervous silence for most of the long trip to Cairo. On the way back, however, Carter and Ford began forming what became a close friendship. "Well, Rosalind said that they were going to serve a full term. Hey, I'd stay. The rent's already paid, right?"
That's right. Can't get a refund. Adjusting to life back in Plains was something of a trial as well. The Carters worked, successfully, to reverse the damage that hucksterism and celebrity had done to the tiny Georgia hamlet. And Jimmy parted in his workshop and began organizing his papers in preparation for writing his 1982 memoir, Keeping the Faith. Otherwise, there seemed little to do but brood. The famous Carter Peanut Warehouse had long since been sold for $1.2 million. The 2,000-acre Carter farm, actually it's 2 farms, was largely worked by lessees. With enforced idleness came more self-doubt and self-pity. Says a friend, Carter was pretty much of a pain in the ass at that time. He needed a lot of hand-holding and reassurance. Yes, nothing to do but brood, so he sat on the porch and whittled with Bartles and James.
Who are Bartles and James?
They are a couple of characters from a TV commercial. They just sit around and carve wood and talk really slow.
What's the commercial for?
Sitting and drinking wine coolers.
You sit around a lot, Marcy.
That's different.
How?
I'm just lazy. The creation of the Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta turned out to be crucial to his self-rehabilitation. With his usual obsessive attention to detail, he envisioned the center not just as another presidential library, but as a clearinghouse of ideas and programs intended to solve international problems and crises. The idea became reality when the center was established at Emory University in 1982, and even more so when its permanent headquarters opened in 1986. Located on 30 acres of woods and gentle hills in the Virginia Highlands section of Atlanta, it consists of 4 low-profile, circular pavilions connected by interior walkways and exterior colonnades, all in a modern neo-federalist style with faint echoes of the White House and fainter echoes of Jefferson's Monticello. Inside, the Carters have adjoining offices, plus a small but comfortable apartment. Apart from the library and museum, operated by the federal government, the Carter Center, with an annual budget of $16 million and a staff of 125, is financed by private donations, mostly from abroad. But we still can't tell you who she is.
The Center's many programs form the agenda of Carter's ex-presidency. Notable among them is Global 2000 Incorporated, an international aid organization aimed at improving disease control and agricultural productivity in third world countries. The work is enhanced by the leadership of Norman Borlaug, an agronomist whose efforts to bring the Green Revolution to India and Pakistan won him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970, and Dr. William H. Fogg, the Carter Center's executive director, who played a major role in the worldwide eradication of smallpox. Global 2000's principal financial backer is Ryoichi Sasakawa, 90, a Japanese multimillionaire industrialist whose checkered resume features extreme right-wing imperialist activities in Japan during the 1930s, but whose later years have been devoted largely to supporting charitable causes. And yes, the Global 2000 Incorporated, this was unfortunately destroyed by a plague carried by a locust.
The key to Global 2000 and the Center's other programs is Carter himself. His hair may be thinner and grayer these days, his face more deeply etched, but he is plainly in charge. As a former president, he is able to gain access to foreign leaders, thereby often ensuring his programs the kind of high-level support on which success depends. On a 10-day trip to Africa in July, Carter, the first active U.S. president ever to set foot in the sub-Saharan part of the continent, swept from the Sudan to Ethiopia, back to the Sudan, and on to Zimbabwe, Zambia, Nigeria, and Ghana. The warm receptions he received from the heads of government were doubtless prompted in part by the many trappings of power he brought with him, including Secret Service protection and an opulent private Boeing 727, complete with crew and a walnut-paneled double bedroom. The plane is donated by the London-based Bank of Credit and Commerce International, another Carter Center backer. Carter, the unassuming plains populace who once banned "Hail to the Chief" and famously carried his own suit bag, retains a modest personal style, but today seems far more comfortable with his perks. Still, as he said shortly after arriving in Africa, "I didn't come here in a position of leadership. I came in a position of fellowship." Still, as he said shortly after arriving in Africa, "Hey, can we drink the water here?"
In Addis Ababa, where he stayed in Haile Selassie's decaying old palace, he spent 2 hours with Ethiopia's President Mengistu Haile Mariam, putting the finishing touches on arrangements for this week's peace talks. In the Sudan, Carter had an hour with Lieutenant General Omar Hassan Ahmad al-Bashir, who only 4 weeks earlier had overthrown the elected government of Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi to urge negotiations in that country's civil war. In Zambia, Carter lunched at the State House with President Kenneth Kaunda, one of the last of the old African independence movement leaders, who hailed his guest as not only a great person, but a great servant of God and man, while outside, impalas and peacocks roamed the grounds and private golf course. Yes, the talks about the peace talks was on the agenda, as was the inability to find decent help.
4 years ago, when Carter, Borlaug, and Sasakawa began trying to bring the Green Revolution to Africa, they signed up a paltry 40 farmers in 4 countries, the Sudan, Ghana, Tanzania, and Zambia, This year there are 85,000 plus unaccounted others who, while not officially participating, have begun to use the same improved seeds, fertilizers, and farming methods that have yielded such impressive results for their neighbors. 300 to 400% increases in corn, sorghum, and millet. Although Carter needs and seeks the support of the governments in the countries where his programs are established, his team stresses local administration and the direct involvement of small-scale farmers, whose minds have been focused wonderfully by recent African famines. Which means they'll do anything, they're so hungry.
At a 200-acre farm in Ojubi, about an hour's drive from Ghana's capital, Accra, Carter inspected a new corn crop literally as high as an elephant's eye. With a farmer's knowing touch, he plucked ears from the stalks, peeled back the husks, and admired the golden kernels. This year, 46 farmers are working the plot of dry yet newly fertile land. But Carter made a point of introducing one of only 2 farmers who were involved when the project began in 1987, a woman named Sarah Daze. As you know, Carter said with his large and famous smile, in our country, the women also take the lead. From there, he proceeded to a nearby celebration of Global 2000's early success. He posed for pictures with farmers and their wives and applauded as brilliantly clad stilt dancers gyrated on their 15-foot thin wooden limbs to the rhythms of a native band. Later, Carter was installed with great pomp as an honorary village chief. To signify his new office, he was given a chief's robe and a hand-carved wooden stool decorated with tribal symbols of Nyansapo, cooperation. Yes, in our country the women do take the lead because peanut heads like Jimmy Carter can't find the path.
Just ask Rosalind.
Marcy, I didn't understand peanut head.
It's just a silly name. Just take any object and put head after it. It means the person you give the name to has a head like the thing you name. For instance, you are a button head. You have the head like a button.
Well, you are a chair head.
Yeah, like that.
And you're a...
Okay, that's enough. For Carter, improved agricultural output is closely linked to the disease control measures he is also promoting. Seriously ill farmers, he reasons, cannot plant and harvest. Polio and river blindness are 2 major afflictions that the team hopes eventually to eliminate. But as a demonstration project, Global 2000 has first targeted the vulnerable life cycle of the guinea worm. Once common in many parts of the world, the worm, which is ingested in drinking water, drawn from ponds, is today confined to a belt across Central Africa and the subcontinent, where it severely incapacitates some 10 million people each year. The Carter Center hopes to eradicate the guinea worm in 6 years, mainly by educating villagers to filter or boil pond water before drinking it and by providing deep wells to replace freshwater ponds. Progress has already been made. Carter visited villages in Nigeria and Ghana that have, with Global 2000's assistance, virtually wiped out the worm. In a Nigerian village, he stood beside the local pond under a canopy of lush green trees and reminded the villagers that the pond was still infested with the worm's nearly invisible larvae. While photographers snapped pictures, he urged the villagers not to drink from the pond unless they first used the fine mesh filters distributed by Global 2000. Beside him stood a small boy, his leg badly swollen with a guinea worm infection. Well, Carter may have wiped out the worm, but he didn't stomp out inflation.
Not all the villages Carter visited were completely satisfied with his help. In one, following the usual dancing and singing, the chief rose to speak. "You arrived last year from out of the blue," he said to Carter, "and you gave us a well and a pump. The village appreciated that. But there was this one small problem. Because the well is only 40 feet deep, it goes dry 3 months out of the year. We know that you, Mr. President," said the chief, "will not be happy with a half-measure solution to our problems." On the spot, Carter convened a meeting with his advisors and promptly announced that the well would be drilled to 70 feet. The chief smiled. The villagers cheered. Yes, they weren't completely satisfied with Jimmy Carter's help because, after all, good help is hard to find.
The next morning, the former president began the return trip to Plains. He was relaxed and voluble about his new life, about his future plans. He will never again run for public office, he insists, about the problems he had as president. Ted Kennedy had a vendetta against me, and about Africa. I find Africa to be the most challenging and intriguing of any place in the world, he said. It's fascinating to meet with so many first and second generation revolutionaries. Carter has no natural enemies anymore, which is liberating. If he sometimes accepts money from donors with dubious backgrounds, Sasakawa, for example, or the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, which has been indicted on money laundering charges, no one complains, at least not if the money goes to worthy causes. Well, Ted Kennedy had a vendetta against him, but Mary Jo Kopechne has one against Ted Kennedy.
Marcy, what's a vendetta, and why does Mary Jo Kopechne have to one against Ted Kennedy?
Well, a vendetta is a personal debt, not like money, but some reason why you would want to get revenge on someone. Mary Jo Kopechne wants to get Ted because he accidentally killed her in a car crash.
She's dead?
Yeah, I guess you'll have to take her revenge posthumously. That means after you die.
Yeah, I know that.
What? You're dead?
No, I just know the meaning of that word.
Oh.
In many ways, of course, Carter is the same old Jimmy, still indiscriminate with superlatives, very wonderful, still using what a former aide calls his 100 ways to a better vocabulary, approach to public speaking, still wearing the same kind of 7-league, heavy-soled wingtips he always has. But he's lost the hard edge. He's productive again, and seems finally to be at peace with conflicts between his well-known born-again Christianity and his life as a public man. Says he on that sometimes touchy subject, "My Christian faith is just like breathing to me, or like being a Southerner or an American. It's all part of the same thing. The sharing, the compassion, the understanding, the dealing with the poor and the destitute and the outcasts." If there is a bit of the white man's burden in that, and if Carter sometimes falls victim to Christianity's age-old catch-22, the sin of pride, well, it doesn't seem very important in the scale of things. And neither does the Carter presidency in retrospect.
And you get the feeling that maybe this is what he thought the presidency would be like. All good works. No Ted Kennedys or Tip O'Neills or bureaucrats or special interests. When he set out from Plains many years ago, naively determined, against the odds, to make a difference. But Billy beat him to the punch.
What do they mean, beat him to the punch?
That means he finished first. He accomplished it before Jimmy.
Oh, so Billy made a difference before Jimmy did.
Right. Billy was always in trouble and always in the news. Sometimes he was more famous than his president brother.
Even more famous than me?
You're not famous, George.
Yeah, but I can dream.
여러분 잘 들어보셨죠? 얼마나 이해가 가셨을까 모르겠습니다. 방금 여러분이 들어보신 작품은 타임지 중 스탠리 W. 클라우드가 쓴 프로파일 Hail to the ex-chief, 즉 전 대통령 만세, 전 카터 대통령에 대한 프로파일입니다. 그러면 지금부터 해설 강의를 보내드리죠. In Ojubi, Ghana, on a sweltering African afternoon, James R. Carter Jr. sits at one end of a large grassy field and acknowledges the applause of farmers gathered around the perimeter. 가나의 오주비시에서 on a sweltering African afternoon, 아주 찌는 듯이 더운 아주 무더운 아프리카의 오후에 James R. Carter Jr. James R. Carter 2세는 sits at one end of a large grass field. 아주 풀이 많은 들판의 한 끝에 앉아 있다. 그리고 acknowledges the applause of farmers gathered around the perimeter. acknowledge는 이럴 때는 감사하다, 뭐뭐에 대한 사례하다 그 소리죠. 그러니까 농부들의 박수갈채에 대하여 감사하고 있다. 어떤 농부들이냐? gathered around the perimeter. 이 perimeter라는 거는 물탈이지만은 이 경우에는 카터를 향해서 둥그렇게 둘러앉은 모여 앉은 농부들을 갖다 이렇게 perimeter라고 그런 거죠.
Many of the farmers have samples of their harvest in baskets before them. corn, sorghum, squash, fruit. 그 많은 농부들은 have samples of their harvest. 그들의 그 추수, 거둔 곡식들의 그 샘플을 가지고 있다. 이 샘플은 그 어느 거에 그 조금씩 띄어낸 거를 샘플이라고 그러죠. 그래, 만약에 어느 사람이 요리를 했다, 또는 뭐 펀치를 만들었다. 그럴 때, okay, let me sample. Let me check out your recipe. 너의 그 요리 비결 좀 알아내자. Let me sample it. 그러면은 그 시음하다, 시식하다, 조금 띄어서 맛을 보는 거를 또 샘플 한다고도 그러죠. 그러니까 이 농부들이 그들의 harvest, 그 추수해온 거, 그 수확한 거에 그 조금씩을 바스켓 안에 가지고 있다. before them, 그들 앞에 이제 그 놓고 있었다 그 소리죠. corn, 그 옥수수, 또 sorghum, 사탕수수죠. squash, 또 호박, fruit, 이런 그 추수한 것의 샘플들을 조금씩 그 가지고 있었다. Large clouds play tag in the blue sky overhead. 그 큰 그 구름들이 play tag은 그 숨바꼭질한다는 소리죠. In the blue sky overhead. 머리 위에 그 푸른 하늘에서는 큰 구름들이 숨바꼭질을 하면서 흘러가고 있었다. While at the opposite end of the field, the stern chiefs of several local villages sit dressed in traditional robes, each carrying a staff topped by a gilt talisman of his authority. 그리고 이제 while at the opposite end of the field, 그 들판의 반대편에는 the stern chiefs, 그 아주 엄격한, 그 근엄한, 그 준엄하고도 그 근엄하게 생긴 그 몇몇의 그 local villages, 그 지방 그 마을의 그 chief, 추장들이겠죠. 그러니까 마을 장들 sit dressed, 앉아 있었다. in traditional robes, 그 전통적인 그 robe라는 거는 헐렁헐렁한 그 판사나 이런 사람들이 입는 옷, 옛날에 그 암행어사가 입던 옷, 그 헐렁거리는 옷을 robe라고 그러죠. 그런데 그 이제 전통적인 옷을 입고 each, 그 chief의 그 각자는 carrying a staff, 지팡이를 들고 있었다. topped by a gilt talisman of his authority. 그의 그 권위를 나타내는 그 talisman이라는 거는 부적, 뭐 액막이 여는 그 호부 이런 거죠. 그러니까 그 지팽이의 꼭대기에는 그 아주 금박을 입힌 그의 권위를 상징하는 talisman, 호부들로다가 부적 같은 거로다가 꼭대기를 씌운 그 지팽이를 갖다가 이제 가지고 있었다. On a platform in front of Carter, a local agricultural official in tan trousers and a t-shirt bends to speak into a microphone. 그러니까 이제 on a platform, 거기 그 플랫폼은 그 교단, 연단이라는 소리죠. In front of Carter, 카터 앞에 있는 그 플랫폼 위에는 a local agricultural official, 그 지방 그 농무관, 그 농무 담당 그 관리가 in tan trousers and t-shirt, 그 황갈색의 그 바지와 그 티셔츠를 입은 그 agricultural official이 bends to speak into a microphone. 그 마이크에다 대고 이제 얘기를 하려고 허리를 구부리고 있었다. President Carter, he says, we are very grateful to you. 카터 대통령라고 그는 말하면서 우리는 당신에게 대단히 고마워하고 있습니다. 아주 당신의 은혜에 그 사의를 표합니다. Because of what you've done for the past 2 years, maize has been very wonderfully produced in this area. 당신께서 귀하께서 해주신 덕분에 지난 2년간 이 옥수수가 상당히 아주 성적이 좋게 산출되었습니다. 농사 수확을 봤다 그 소리죠. 이 지역에서. This is wonderful. 아주 멋있습니다. In fact, we love you. 사실 우리는 당신을 사랑합니다. In fact, we love you. We love you almost as we love peanuts. 이게 이제 쥐미현 농담인데 카터가 땅콩 농장주였다 해갖고 미국 사람들은 누구나 땅콩을 좋아하지요. 그래 땅콩 좋아하는 만큼 당신을 좋아한다 라고 이 농담을 한 것입니다. 자, 그러면 A면 강의 마치고 다음 면에서 계속해서 강의 있도록 하겠습니다.